I want to put it out to the Insta-webs. What I've been working on the last 12 months and what I will continue to work on for 2020. And I really think that it fits for Rachael, for who I am as a person. Maybe this is not for everybody. It's probably, I would like for it to be for everybody because my therapist has revolutionized my emotional well-being, and the way I process emotions and stress and just being a human. And so I think that this should be for everybody, but you take it for whatever you want. If you want to just sit here and watch that I'm drinking with no nails on one hand and nails on the other hand, there you go. Do you. That's what's going on around here. So let me preface all this. We were supposed to go and visit my family for Christmas. I had to work at the hospital Christmas Day, which is fine. Whatever, I do have little kids, but we had it all set up where we woke them up early, blah, blah, blah. Everything was great. I went and took care of some sick people at the hospital. I don't really take care of them. I work in the lab. You nurses, y'all are the real heroes. My son, Christmas Eve morning, was feeling really crappy. And Christmas Day, 5 a.m., I wake up. He's blazing with a fever. I probably slept like 3 hours that night. Christmas Day, I went to work. My husband was updating me on his condition. He was getting worse and worse and worse. Christmas Day night, he was sick. He was really sick. He's 7. So it's not like he's a newborn, I'm going to take him in immediately. I could tell it was viral. He had a high fever, or not high, he had a medium fever for a 7-year-old. And so I kind of watched him. I didn't sleep at all. He was getting worse progressively through the night. It was to the point where his fever was affecting kind of his cognizance and things like that. I called the 24-hour nurse helpline, which was absolutely incredible, by the way. If y'all have that on your insurance, if you've never used it, it's pretty amazing. Called her at 3 o'clock in the morning, told her I hadn't slept in about 72 hours, and was kind of in a daze reciting off his symptoms. I was getting really worried because he'd been above 104 for a couple hours, and I just didn't know with a 7-year-old, do I take him into my ER? Because I had just come from the ER from my hospital, and it was freaking full of people with the flu. So I didn't want to take my little boy, who is already immunosusceptible, to my hospital that's full of disease. So anyway, she kind of stopped me and was like, look, mom to mom, stop being clinical. You're tired. Tell me, mom to mom, what his symptoms are and what you're worried about. And I was like, okay. She was great. Anyway, she contacted somehow my doctor in the middle of the night and set up an appointment for me for 4 hours later for my little boy, so we didn't have to take him into the ER. That was an amazing blessing. Turns out he has the flu. He had the flu all the way through Christmas week. Is this Tuesday? This is Tuesday, almost a week later. First day he has woken up without a fever. He still feels a little crappy. He's got a fever. My husband is now sick, and I'm 100% he has the flu. Interesting thing, we all got our flu shots. So don't come at me. Don't come at me. I work in a hospital. My husband's active duty military. We are both compulsively required to get the flu shot. I love all of y'all's little messages and suggestions. Please do not message me with your opinion about the flu shot, whether positive or negative. We have to get it for our work. And 50% of this family now has the flu. So it probably just didn't match. The shot did not match with the strain we got. Anyway, all that to say, we had to miss going to Kentucky for my family's Christmas. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. We live pretty much all over the country. I live all the way on the East Coast in the DMV. My little brother lived all the way on the West Coast in Seattle. He is an Army Ranger, HOA, and my other siblings live somewhere in the middle. My baby sister lives in Arkansas going to college. My other sister lives on the other side of Tennessee, 6 hours from my parents in Memphis. And we're spread everywhere, right? We have not all been together, all 5 of us siblings, and it's been almost 3 years for me. So it was a really big deal. I was really excited to see my family, to see my 47,000 first cousins, their 14 million offspring. I don't even know how many baby cousins I have now. We're not going to get into that. We're all Southern, so, take that for what it's worth. I'm just kidding. We had to cancel going to Kentucky because of how sick my little boy was. And I have dealt with a range of emotions this week, from sadness and loneliness and disappointment to getting frustrated and aggravated and irritated. And I think before I started therapy last year. It was February when I started therapy with my amazing therapist. So it's been almost a year. I've gone once a week to therapy. And before that, I would not have dealt with this range of emotions. I don't want to say appropriately. It is not appropriately for me, but I would have dealt with it in a totally different way than I dealt with it this year. And I feel like so many of us experience that range of emotions, not just during the holidays, but a lot. And as women, as whether you're a mom, whether you're not, if you're a full-time jobber, if you don't, if you're a maker, if you're not a maker, I think we can acutely experience disappointment and loneliness and grief in a much different way than our partners can possibly. And I was involved in a very traumatic event over a decade ago that has I have PTSD, and I had a TBI, traumatic brain injury, from the event, and a lot of emotional things that came with it. One day I'll get on here and I'll tell everyone. I'm very open about it, but I like to safeguard myself, and I like to be ready to talk about that when I'm ready. And I feel like this week I'm not quite ready, but there were 2 deaths of very, very dear friends that came from it. And I've dealt with the emotions that came from that incorrectly. And then also being an Army wife and having babies on deployments, and, having to deal with not only just the day-to-day of taking care of a newborn away, thousands of miles away from your family and your husband not being there, but then the emotional baggage of, dealing with your husband had, he hadn't seen his baby until she was 7 months old, things like that, which now she's 9. She's great. Everything is fine. But there's a lot of things that I've experienced that I believe after the wreck that I was in over a decade ago, I didn't honor my emotions. I started to suppress, and then I compartmentalized. And from that, I just began to constantly compartmentalize. And honestly, it was just a fight or flight. It was a self-protection thing. It wasn't that I didn't want to feel anything. It was that I had a newborn baby, and I was all by myself with no help and no husband. And, my family has moved 7 times. We've lived in 7 states, 6 or 7 states. So it wasn't that I was compartmentalizing not to deal with that emotion. It was because I had to get things done. I just had to make it through that day. And so I just kind of reprogrammed my brain to put them in different compartments and close the door. That all came to a crashing mental breakdown last year, and I had tried therapy twice before. I was actually court-ordered therapy after the vehicle wreck that I was in when we were hit by a drunk driver and killed my 2 sweet friends. That was a train wreck. I hated that therapy, and I was also in a crazy fog of the TBI and stuff like that. I tried therapy once more after I had my second baby and was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I literally fled my therapist's office after the 3rd visit in tears, and I never went back. And then that was 7 years ago. And then, last year I decided I got to do something about this because I feel like I'm not a human anymore. This is all coming to a point. I promise you. I promise. I just want to put it out there that what you're going through is real, and what you're going through, you might be blowing it off right now. You might be saying, I can't deal with this right now. I just have to get through the day. I have to get through this month of my husband being out of town. I have to get through this week of figuring out how to pay my bills as a single mom. I have to get through this day of all of my children being sick and I had to call into work. And what you're going through is real. And there can also be things in your past that affect how you process things for the year 2020. I was devastatingly disappointed to not go to Kentucky. And I felt guilty because my 7-year-old little boy couldn't help it. He didn't do it on purpose to me. And I felt guilty for feeling disappointed. I felt guilty for feeling angry. I felt guilty for all these valid feelings that I felt. I don't get to see my parents but twice a year. And my family is very close. Like I said, I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. We all text each other almost every day. It was a really big deal for me to physically be around my family this year. Compounding that with absolutely no sleep, the guilt of working on Christmas Day and not being with my small children, there's just a lot going on. And I had to remind myself, if this had been Rachael a year ago, I would have pushed that down. I would have pushed that grief down. I would have pushed that disappointment down. I would have said, it's not his fault. It'll get better. I'll see my family soon. I just need to get through this, blah, blah, blah. What my therapist has taught me and what I want to talk about today for 2020, for my resolution, if not for any of yours, is I need to stop. I use the wrong word of fractionating. It's because I have a science background. It's not the appropriate term, but my therapist uses the word disassociating. And I am naturally trying to dissociate those feelings from the whole Rachael, from who I am as a person, not just as a mom, but as a woman, as a scientist, as everything that makes up the puzzle piece of me. I am trying to dissociate those feelings because of one reason or another and put them in different boxes and close the door. And I don't need to do that anymore because that is what held me back from acknowledging and validating myself. A lot of that self-worth that got flushed down the toilet for so many years, that came from me not validating my feelings and not validating the disappointment, the anger. I felt like I couldn't be angry at my husband. It wasn't his fault that he went and served in Afghanistan and experienced horrible traumas and was blown up by a terrorist twice. I have anger that he's experienced that. I have anger of the things that he is going through in his military career due to that it wasn't his fault. But I also have anger and disappointment and grief that the things that I had to experience as a mom of a newborn while he was gone. And feeling those feelings, you don't have to assign blame to something. I feel like as humans, we naturally have to just put the blame on something, even if it's ourselves. Even if getting onto yourself by saying, you shouldn't feel angry, it's not his fault. No, you need to validate that you feel those feelings. And that is what my therapist has taught me, is to put the pieces of Rachael back together to make the whole Rachael. The whole Rachael is not happy, positive, trying to make people laugh all the time, goofy, there's a chance this is wine. That's not the whole Rachael. The whole Rachael is the trauma that I've been through, the PTSD I'm diagnosed with. The whole Rachael is making sure that acknowledging that one of the greatest thrills, one of the greatest satisfactions in my life is reaching out, even if it's just one of you, and telling you, or having that connection and saying, me too. Me too. What you're going through is not fake. It's not stupid. It's not weak. It's the whole part of you. And I think no matter what else I've learned from my therapist, that's the number one thing that she's worked on with me, but that I've taken away, is integrating those feelings, honoring those feelings. So for 2020, my resolution, not really resolution, because like I said, it's something I've been working on, but I want to dig in, get entrenched even deeper. It's embrace the suck. And that's a catchphrase that everybody says a lot. I know people like to attribute that to Brene Brown. They like to attribute it to Rachael Hollis. They like to guess what? Guess who said embrace the suck for a long time? 1776, babe. Oh, actually 1775. Continental Army, HOA. It's been a military thing for a really long time, but it's true. It's what they're saying is, this is super sucky right now. What you're going through, super sucky. Elbow deep in mud while bullets are flying over your head, super sucky. Getting stuck in a little MASH tent, being treated for being blown up by an insurgent in Afghanistan, literally what happened to my husband, being out for 5 days and not knowing where you are, that's super sucky. Just having to move your family from one place to another when your baby's literally just started kindergarten, super sucky. What you cannot do is deny that it's sucky. You can't deny it, because you will not be able to go on much longer if you keep denying. If you keep saying, it'll get better. Oh, but there's other people out there that have it worse. Oh, no, embrace that suck. Say, this is sucky. And what you do is you find that willpower to keep going on and keep getting better, and find a different path to make that work for you, because you're embracing that suck. And I know that sounds really intense and crazy, but I'm telling you, if you just embrace that suck, it will become better. And it's because you're mentally making yourself better, mentally and emotionally, and then also physically. Embracing that suck. One of my favorite things, this is kind of my motivation going into 2020, right? I'm a massive fan of TedTalks. I don't know if you watch them. You can podcast them. There's a lot of different ways you can read them. I usually like reading my TEDTalks. I know that's weird, but there's a website, ideas.ted.com. This is backwards for you. You're not going to... Anyway, there's a series called How to Be a Better Human, and it's a bunch of TED Talks that they put all together to essentially facilitate how to be a better human. And I'm not talking about positivity, and I'm not talking about just doing, but I'm talking about truly making yourself bring together all those parts, like how I talked about. And this just, man, it's so meshed with this one TED Talk, so meshed with what I'm going through this year and what I want to bring into 2020. I have notes, y'all. I have notes. So I think what we deal with as women a lot is our internal dialogue, and then the people around us. There's this culture of positivity, and it's like I know that sounds stupid because I said that with like an ew face, and I'm like, culture of positivity, disgusting. But it is. It's this massive trend of positivity and like I'm all about mindfulness. Don't even get me into my yoga and being in touch with, no, that's great. That's not what I'm talking about. It's this culture of just putting it out there, all the little memes and the inspirations and blah, blah, blah. And that's detrimental to putting yourself together, putting all the pieces of yourself together. You hear people around you, it could be worse. And I know I posted a video a few weeks ago saying, as a maker, as an artist, during our busy season of Christmas, I'm like, hey, I know this is sucky, all this stress we're going through, and just pull your head up, take a breath, Remember, you could be born into another country that you don't even have the freedoms to have a small business. That's not the kind of positivity I'm talking about. That is remembering our blessings even in a stressful situation. What I'm talking about in this is someone saying, oh man, the situation that really sucks, you're going through that. It could be worse. It could be. Or look on the bright side. Here's the no-no of all no-nos, the worst of the worst. When someone looks at me and says, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to turn out. Just don't worry about it. Are you freaking serious? Everything works out because I make it work out. I cannot stand it when people tell me, everything will work out. No, because that implies that there is no hard work put into that. And things work out in really hard situations because we put our big girl panties on and we embrace the suck, right? That's how things actually work out. So there's this woman, her name is Susan David. I'm just putting these up here. I told you, it's a mini TED Talk, right? Susan David, she is a professor at Harvard University Medical School, and she's the author of a book called Emotional Agility. And she says, positivity is this new form of moral correctness, where it's politically and morally incorrect to not be positive about something, especially in the workplace. The workplace, especially for women in the workplace, it is seen as taboo to not be positive about a situation. And suppressing or closing the door on those difficult emotions that a lot of times us as women, we might even identify them as selfish emotions. Disappointment, grief over something that maybe we think others shouldn't, it's not valid enough to grieve over. Maybe your small business failing or not doing as well during the Christmas season. You didn't sell as many hats as your goal you had set. Maybe you didn't sell any hats this year. You can experience grief over that. And you think, oh, if I say that out loud, people are going to laugh. That's the stupidest thing when other people are going through things that are so much worse. See? Hear that internal dialogue? So what I found really interesting is this woman was involved in some clinical studies that it show that people who consistently shove down emotions or consistently trying to be, but my husband calls it false positivity. And this, believe me, I'm not advocating being melancholy or being, I will get to that at the end. I'm not advocating being a Debbie Downer. I'm talking about the people who shove down those emotions, who don't validate what they're feeling and just say, it's going to be fine. I can't believe I feel that way. Like, I'm really disappointed, but it's not their fault, so I'm just not going to say anything. You know, like, that's what I'm talking about. Clinical studies have shown that people who are consistently pushing down emotions and trying to be positive in a situation where they need to embrace that emotion are documented to be associated with lower levels of resilience, both mentally and physically, lower levels of well-being, both mentally and physically, the way you perceive yourself, and documented higher levels of anxiety and depression than people who can identify the emotions that they're going through and deal with those emotions appropriately. Isn't that amazing that there are clinical trials that have shown that there are higher levels of anxiety and depression in people who are trying to be positive and not embracing the suck? That just blew my mind, but it makes so much sense. And so I want to give you a couple of my therapist is all about real world, everyday takeaway steps. This is not like, let's talk about your past. Like, we barely have in my therapy in a year. We haven't talked about it. This is making it through your everyday. This is how do you live a better life today and tomorrow with what you're going through. So there's a couple of steps that both this TED Talk and my therapist, they're in sync with. And I just wanted to communicate those to you. First of all, the number one thing that I've been working on that my therapist has been shoving down my throat is label the emotion that you're feeling. So this past week, I was devastatingly disappointed. And I don't associate that with, I don't know what I'm trying to say, that it's not my little boy's fault, that it's not anybody's fault. I'm just disappointed that I didn't get to see my family and my siblings, period. I think so many times we just throw the label stressed on everything, right? Like whatever you're going through right now, maybe it's anger, it's frustration, it's disappointment, it's being tired, all these things rolled up into a big ball and then compounded by your daily responsibilities, taking care of kids, taking care of a husband, maybe working a full-time job, doing a maker business, and we roll it all up and we just call it stress. I'm just stressed, okay? I'm just stressed out right now. I'm just always stressed. That's not labeling an emotion. That's putting it into a compartment of being stressed. And my therapist will not allow me to say I'm just stressed. She's like, what emotion are you feeling at this moment? Unattach it from guilt, from whatever. What emotion are you feeling? I am disappointed. I labeled it. I put a label on it. And you can have multiple ones. So after you identify that emotion, I brought this up to my best friend Ashley of Montana Crochet the other day, and I feel like both of us were almost to the point of tears. It was when we were so stressed out. It was right before Christmas. We were getting a ridiculous amount of orders out the door. I had markets upon markets upon markets that I was not prepared for. She had the Christmas Advents, and we were both losing our minds, right? And I had just come out of a therapy session, and something that she said to me triggered an inner dialogue that I'll say to myself, not thinking about it. And I said, you know what? My therapist, the number one thing she's been saying to me lately is, you would never talk to yourself the way you talk to your daughter, Addie. If Addie was going through what you're going through right now, you would never use the tone and the words that you're telling yourself. You would have so much compassion for that little girl. You would validate her feelings. Or put it, if you don't have a little girl, your best friend. If your best friend was just going through something, and you would never say, shake it off. Like, maybe you would, but you know what I'm saying? Like something that needs to be validated, when that person needs to be said, me too, or you're going through something crappy. You'd never use the tone that we use to talk to ourselves. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. She said, you talk to Rachael like you would talk to Addie, or you would talk to Ashley. And that almost broke my heart for Rachael. Because you don't honor yourself and validate yourself the way we expend energy into others around us. Because we don't see ourselves as worthy enough to have that tone talking to ourselves. So notice the second step. First, identify and name it. Secondly, notice the emotion and have compassion on yourself as you would your child or a beloved best friend. Speak to yourself. Speak to that emotion. Don't compartmentalize. Speak to yourself as you would to a best friend. And it's hard sometimes to stop that inner dialogue, to stop that bashing of ourselves or suppressing. Pull yourself out of it. And one way to do that is to identify and to jot stuff down. I'm not a big journaler, writer of a journal, journaling. My therapist has over and over and over again pushed journaling on me, and I finally, after a year, understand. And I'm not talking about getting a fancy journal. I have them. I don't even hardly write in those. This is literally what my journaling looks like. And I know y'all are going to say, oh my God, that's a lot. Most days it's like 3 lines. And I have pieces of paper laying all over the house, and you just jot down what you're frustrated about. I throw them away. I never keep these. She's like, don't reread it. Don't unless you just are dying to, don't just write it down. The physical part of writing down an emotion or what you're frustrated about or what you're angry about, that right there is identifying the emotion. Isn't that amazing? Just writing down it doesn't even have to be grammatically correct. It is validating what you're going through right now. And it's honoring the person that you are as a whole. That Rachael as a whole is feeling that right now. So we're going to label the emotion. You're going to then notice the emotion and have compassion on it as you would a child or a best friend. And then, this is maybe the part that's a little more work, but she's having me to, and again, it's in the TED Talk as well. Crazy how they two are together. Notice your emotional story, the emotional journey that came with that feeling. And I know this is starting to sound woo-woo a little bit, but just stay with me for another second. Instead of just saying, okay, fine, here's the label. I'm sad right now. I'm disappointed. You have to do something. We're not just labeling and doing all this to then wallow in it, right? You want to learn how to become a better person, a better human, and to do something with the emotions that you feel. God gave us those emotions for a reason. So instead of just saying, okay, I'm sad. I've noticed it. Great. I put a label on it. I'm sad. Now what do I do? You want to say, I'm feeling sad. It's almost like you become a little bit clinical. Pull yourself out of yourself and say, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling disappointed. I feel like I want to be alone. I feel like I want to leave my house. And then bring in your intentionality and your resolve as a grown-up human, and use those emotions to analyze the story around why you're feeling that way. So honestly, a great way just to do this is, like I said, just journaling. Just jot it down. I keep a little notebook by my bed. I have one at night. Like, everybody has a different time of the day. A lot of times I just jot during the day there's like the back of a fruit container, like I have literally written on a lot. It's usually in my car, honestly, when I'm sitting in front of a grocery store or whatever, and I just will grab a piece of paper or a napkin and just write, and then just throw it away. But that's acknowledging that journey. And it honestly will bring together those pieces that fractionate, those dissociated emotions that you're trying to deal with, and acknowledging that it's part of me. It's part of me as a human. I think the piece that a lot of people who are pushing back against this will say, well, I don't want to be that negative, Nancy. I don't want to be. That's not where we're going with this at all. Because remember, the last piece is you're integrating, you're looking at that emotional journey or that emotional story of what you're going through. It's not the therapist, or the doctor, Susan David, the Harvard Medical School lady, says, it's not whether you have negative thoughts or emotions, but it's whether you get hooked into them. This is the biggest takeaway ever, and this is what I'm taking into 2020, is I want to acknowledge those emotions. I want to acknowledge that Rachael as a whole, that I'm a human being and all these different pieces, and it's not wrong to feel that way. I shouldn't put guilt on myself to feel that way. I should let myself feel disappointed. I should let myself feel angry or frustrated and validate that. But then I don't want those feelings to then drive my behaviors and actions when you get hooked into them. And that's when you start going down the path of being really negative, or being consistently, I am not a glass half full person. I don't think I'm a glass half empty person. I'm very black and white. I'm very clinical. This is how much water is in the cup in milliliters /cc's. Like, I'm very much a realist. It's how I operate. A lot of scientists are that way. A lot of non-scientists are that way. But I do want to be I don't want to go down the road of being pessimistic after acknowledging these feelings, right? And because then that's when you do start to assign blame again. Now I'm acknowledging that I'm disappointed. I'm acknowledging that I'm angry or frustrated at my husband in this situation. You wallow in those, you get hooked into them, and then you're going to start treating that person like crap because you're hooked into those feelings, right? So that's what this Susan David is saying. Don't let those feelings then drive your behaviors and actions. We acknowledge it. We identify it. We acknowledge it. We say, what's that emotional story around that? And then you let it go. And then you have built new muscles in your brain. You have built new connections that are helping you deal with those emotions, but then not let it affect your day-to-day, and not let it affect the next step, not let it affect your job or your family or your marriage or your relationship with your kids. Those new connections, I promise you, at first it feels a little clunky, it feels weird, it feels a little woo-woo, but now it's almost become muscle memory for me. And it honestly makes me feel so much more whole as a person and feels validated, even if no one in your life validates you right now. Maybe you don't have a therapist who validate you. Maybe you don't have a spouse who validates you. Maybe you don't even have a friend who will validate you. And I'm not talking about validating like in a like my life is terrible. Not being whiny. Not being. I'm all about responsibility and consequences. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about validating and you've felt it. I just hit the max capacity on a video. Great. That's what I wanted to say. That's my little TED Talk for 2020. But that's what I'm moving into 2020 with. I will not be going to a New Year's Eve party. I will be taking care of 2 male invalids who have the flu. So I just wanted to tell you what path I've been taking, where I am right now. And that I think my phrase for 2020 is embrace the suck. And there'll be a lot coming with that. I'm taking my business, hopefully, to some new areas in 2020. I definitely have some resolutions, like business-wise and for my family, that I want to accomplish. But for me as a person, for me as Rachael, it's embrace the suck. And not in a negative way, but embracing the suck. And continuing on the path of identifying that it's me as a whole that is feeling that. So thanks so much for listening to this. Please message me. I'm at Addison James Knits on Instagram, addisonjamesknits@gmail.com for an email. Please reach out anytime. I'm not a therapist. I am clinical, but in a laboratory sense. I deal with blood all day long. So I'm not a licensed therapist. I just want to communicate to you what I've been working on with my therapist the past year. I feel like somebody out there could benefit from this. So I love all y'all. Please know you're not alone. You don't have to embrace the suck by yourself. Reach out and find somebody who can love you compassionately as the amazing human that you are. Happy New Year's. See ya in the new year, I guess.